This lab video will be on the endocrine system, which concerns hormones, and all that hormones are chemicals that travel in the bloodstream to reach a target tissue. And structures that secrete hormones, we can call them glands. So let us draw an example. So here's a gland, an organ that creates hormones. So there is a hormone that it created. And the target for this, let's say it's a cell all the way out here. So how is this going to reach its target? This is the target tissue. And the answer is via the circulatory system. So the hormone gets secreted into the blood and it knows to reach this target tissue. So it's going to travel in the bloodstream. And once it's here, once this hormone is at the target tissue, it will have some kind of effect. So we'll draw some indicator of that, an effect happening. Okay, an important endocrine gland is the hypophysis, or also called the pituitary gland. So let's first orient ourselves. I'm going to draw a human head. There's his nose, there's that and that. This would be this person's brain. And the front of the brain towards the front, so going in this direction, this would be the anterior of the brain. Going in this direction, this is posterior. This is going to help us with our naming in a sec. Okay, now let me draw the pituitary gland. It has a little nub sticking out, bottom lobe, and we have the second lobe. So here, this upper part, this is actually the hypothalamus, kind of the command of the pituitary gland. So that's approximately this region. And this structure is in the brain. So hypothalamus is in the brain. Now, these two lobes down here, they're both the pituitary gland. They're both the pituitary gland. So this chunk of tissue and this chunk of tissue. Now, to be more specific, this is the anterior, because it's the one going to the front of the brain, like according to this diagram over here. This is the anterior pituitary gland. So this chunk of tissue back here, this is the posterior. This is your posterior pituitary gland. So anterior here, posterior here. Notice that the hypothalamus is directly connected to the pituitary gland. And this pathway here, this bridge, we call this the pituitary stalk. Pituitary stalk. Pituitary. It's also called the infundibulum. Infundibulum or infundibular stalk. Okay, this will be important later. So here's a bit of a more anatomically correct pituitary gland, but it kind of looks hopefully like that. Okay, let's first talk about the anterior part first. So the anterior part secretes 7 main hormones, and let us discuss the first one that the anterior secretes, so the front lobe. It's called follicle stimulating hormone, commonly shortened to FSH. And this is going to target the gonads. And this depends on your gender. So if you are a female, your gonads are called ovaries. If you are a male, we call the gonads testes. To help you remember where FSH goes, there's structures in ovaries called follicles. So follicle stimulating hormone, this is most likely where this was first discovered. So FSH, because this goes to the follicles which are in the ovaries. Okay, the next hormone made by the anterior gland, This one is called luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone, which can be abbreviated to LH. And this actually also goes to the gonads. So again, if you are a female, your gonads are called ovaries. If you are a male, your gonads are called testes. To help you remember that this goes to the gonads, there's a structure in the female's ovary called the corpus luteum. And this actually comes from the follicle. So after ovulation, the follicle becomes a structure known as a corpus luteum. Follicle becomes something called the corpus luteum. So notice we have this prefix lut, and we have something called the corpus luteum. Okay, now let's discuss, very briefly what these two hormones do. So let's do a little box here: FSH, LH, and then a bit of a different function in the sexes. Okay, we will do female first. So one function of FSH is this going to help us create or stimulate the production of pregnancy hormones like estrogen. Creation of pregnancy hormones. Okay. And the second thing is, it is going to trigger ovulation in conjunction with LH. Trigger ovulation. LH has a similar role. We're not going to get in depth on this now, but you can say the same things for LH. FSH for guys, it stimulates a process known as spermatogenesis, which is sperm production in our testes. Sperm production. LH for guys, it also goes to our testes, but then it subdivides into the Leydig cells, and your Leydig cells produce testosterone. So you can say LH stimulates the production of testosterone. And testosterone is responsible for your secondary male characteristics. Okay, that's it for these two hormones. Next hormone from the anterior pituitary gland has a bit of a long name. This one is called Adrenocorticotropic Hormone. Adrenocorticotropic hormone. This is abbreviated to ACTH. And the name kind of tells you where this is going to go. Adreno tells me this is going to go to the adrenal gland, but cortico tells me it's going to be the cortex of the adrenal gland. So this is going to go to the adrenal gland's cortex, or the adrenal cortex. The adrenal cortex. So this is on top of our kidney. So right now I drew in the left kidney, and sitting on top we have this triangular shaped structure. This is the adrenal gland. So here would be the left kidney, and up here this would be the left adrenal gland. So that's where this hormone goes, specifically its cortex or its outer layer of tissue. Left adrenal gland. Okay, ACTH stimulates the production of cortisol, of a hormone called cortisol. This is commonly known as the stress hormone because stress can stimulate its production. One thing cortisol can do is it can help us regulate blood pressure. Regulate blood pressure. Second function, it can help us break down our macromolecules, so it has metabolic function. Metabolic function, it can help us break down the macromolecules like proteins, like fats and carbs, for the purpose of producing energy. Breaking down fats, breaking down protein, and also breaking down carbs or your sugars. And a couple things can activate adrenocorticotropic hormones release, one of them being stress. Okay, next hormone. This one is not so bad. This one is thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. And this goes to your thyroid gland. One of the hormones produced by your thyroid gland is thyroxine. We'll speak more about thyroxine later. Okay, so we have AT, FLAT. The next hormone, something called prolactin. And prolactin is a bit different than the other hormones for one reason, which we'll discuss later. So prolactin is going to go to a female's mammary glands. And these are in her breast tissue. In breasts. This is going to cause milk production. Milk production. And the little note here is after childbirth. So you do not want this hormone turned on at all times. So we'll speak more about that later. Prolactin. Next hormone from the anterior pituitary are things called endorphins. Endorphins. And these guys, they can reduce your perception of pain. Reduce your perception of pain. And they can also make you feel good. And biologically, we call this state euphoria, a euphoric state. And a couple things can trigger the release of endorphins. One is stress. We also have exercise, if you think of a runner's high after a runner has finished running. Exercise and also pain. And your endorphins target your nerve cells. So they target nerves. Okay, the last hormone is something called growth hormone. And they will eventually indirectly target muscles and bones. They'll eventually target muscles and bones. I say indirectly because we're first going to hit the liver, and then we'll create a new hormone that goes to the muscles and bones. But I'll continue on growth hormone in the next video.